Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop destination for the civil services English medium aspirants. Welcome to the daily Hindu analysis. If I'm clearly audible and visible, please let me know in the live chat box and allow me to resume this session. Please write yes and we will move forward. Audio and video looks good. Let's start. An important announcement. In case you're starting your preparation for 2026 or 2027 and you need any kind of assistance in accessing the courses that are available on the platform, an offer is presently running where we are giving a 55% off on all courses along with a double validity. In case you take an offer for 6 months, the next 6 months are given to you absolutely free of cost. The same is with 9 months, 12 months and 18 months. In case you want to make use of this, make sure that you use the code IAS English for taking this offer. Few topics that are important from today's Delhi edition of the Hindu that we'll be discussing. Let's start with the first topic. A grand vision and the great Indian research deficit. This is important from GS paper 3 relating to infrastructure, research, technology, science and tech, governance, etc. It is basically talking about the challenges faced in the R&D, research and development sector of India. Let's map this and understand what are the challenges. Now, first things first, why is research very, very important in the first place? If India is aspiring to be a developed country, a Viksit Bharat by 2047, some aspects of the economy need to turn or change in a very, very fast manner. Productivity needs to be enhanced. Is voice low? We have also used a mic now. I don't think it should be a problem. Is the voice low? Please tell me in the live chat. I'm using a mic, so this should not be a problem anymore. All good. Okay. So, in order to ensure that the processes that happen in the economy, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is mining, whether it is basic value addition, any process is in the economy can be made to be done faster in a more efficient manner by investing in what? By investing in technology. And technology can be introduced, or new technology and innovation can be created using only one aspect, that is research. If you research on a certain component, for example, a better use of an alloy, for example, the better use of a semiconductor, how to create certain optical fiber cables, etc., for better communication, any process, whether manufacturing, whether in the services sector, whether mining, can be made faster, can be made more efficient, and the cost involved in the production can definitely be reduced with the usage of better technology, better methods. And technological advancement comes from only investing in research and innovation. That is why research and innovation is at the heart of the idea that we need to move if we want to develop very, very fast in an efficient manner, reduce our costs, be competitive. In that case, research and development has to be focused on. But this R&D ecosystem in India is plagued by various challenges. Let's understand the challenges of research and development sector in India. The first challenge mentioned in the editorial gives a very beautiful picture in terms of numbers. The numbers suggest that we as a population, because we are such a big populous country, we constitute around 17% of the world's population. And if you consider this as 17% of brains, we have 17% of the world's population can be called as 17% of the brains in the world. But this population of 17% is contributing to only a 3% output in the field of research. The first stark major mismatch that we can see. The first issue, 17% of the population but contributing only to 3% of the research output, maybe in the form of patents, maybe in the form of innovation, maybe in the form of new technologies that are developed. This mismatch is very concerning. Another mismatch or issue that we are witnessing in India since the 1990s with the era of globalization is the issue of brain drain. Yes, we had one of the finest engineers coming out from one of the finest educational institutions, for example, IITs, which are ranked in top 500 colleges in the world. But this brain drain is a major issue. Why? Because graduates from fields such as STEM, those fields that are instrumental in research and development for technology, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, people in these fields are often moving out of the country. So there is out migration because of globalization in the 1990s. We had also suffered. Why? Because opportunities were better, job profiles were better in the Western countries. So there was out migration to those countries, people settling in USA, people settling in Europe. Brain drain, the finest minds that India produces but lost. Another major issue is that any kind of sector, if you do not provide public funding, will be starved. The same problem is with the R&D sector. We are only contributing or spending, the expenditure is only about 0.7%, yes, not even 1% of the GDP. 0.7% of the GDP is spent in the R&D field, leading to major funding scarcity. That becomes another issue. The expenditure is lagging and it is not sufficient to drive technology and innovation in the economy. When we do a parallel with other countries, for example, China or USA almost spends about 3.5% of its GDP on R&D related expenditure. That is a stark contrast. Even China around spends 2.5% of its GDP in the R&D sector. Of course, it is a virtuous loop. Why do we call it the virtuous loop? It is a virtuous loop because the more you invest in innovation, the more you invest in technology, the more will be the amplifying impact, multiplier impact on your economic growth. So this investment is not a waste, rather an investment that is only set to bring in results. Yet we are limiting the amount that we are spending in this sector. Another major issue, for instance, if you look at the developed countries, a huge contribution to R&D is by the private sector. In fact, in developed countries, 2/3 of the investments and breakthroughs are done by the private sector. In India, there is over dependence and over reliance. In fact, the sector that is running or the sector that is allowing for the R&D sector to move is the public sector. Public sector in India contributes almost 63% to R&D. And that is why there is a problem. Unless your private sector becomes competitive, unless your private sector companies themselves have an urge to innovate, to have better products, to cut costs, to make their products competitive, to have breakthroughs in launching newer products, if that is not the spirit in which the private sector is running, this dependence becomes a liability. The issue is also the kind of perception the private sector has. The private sector in India is extremely risk averse. Why take the risk? Why invest in research? Why take the time? Why invest in a prototype? So there is a risk averse nature of the private sector in India, and that becomes detrimental for innovation in the country. In fact, the editorial makes a stark contrast and says that one tech company, for instance, a tech company in China called Huawei, is spending way more. Just one company, imagine one tech company, one tech giant in a country is investing and spending more than an entire country, that is India. Now that is a stark comparison. Major issue in that context. There is also another problem related to the lack of link or sync, whatever you want to call it, between academia, the universities, the higher education sectors, and the industry. In other countries, this sync is very prominent. The industry does multiple surveys. The industry lays down various demands and conveys the same to the higher education institutions where research is being taken up. For example, the industry can say that please research in this area of semiconductor designs, because these are very important for chip manufacturing processes in India. And the academia, the universities can start research. They can get people to do PhD, their specialization in these areas, and new research papers can be published. This research is driven on the basis of what? What is required by the industry. Whatever is demanded by the economy. If this link is not connected, if the industry does not support the academia for developing a prototype of what they require, and if the academia or universities are working in silos without any integration with the industry, this is not going to lead to economic development. Our academic institutions are also focused a lot on rote learning, focused a lot on learning which is theory based in nature. The research environment is also lacking, which is why there are students who want to get into research, do not continue their higher education in India as well. The link is broken. Another major issue is associated with various problems relating to the government or the administrative delays. Delays in disbursement of grants, of funds, delays in the patent filing processes, how difficult it is, delays in conducting certain challenges and inviting the private sector to come and invest. So the government ease of doing or ease of filing patent problems is also another issue that is plaguing the R&D sector. Another major important fact that was mentioned was World Intellectual Property Organization releases certain reports on how certain countries are doing in terms of filing of patents. In these reports, The editorial says, the author mentions, yes, India has improved in the number of patents that we are filing. That means if you take a base low, very, very low, as compared to that, yes, we have increased in the number of patents that we have filed. The comparison between where we are and where we are now. But when you look at the absolute numbers, not the relative increase, the absolute numbers, the numbers as a percentage of where we stand globally, India's performance is very low. So these are the problems that are plaguing the R&D sector as well. What can be the solutions? We will dive into that, but let's read certain aspects of the editorial that mentions the same kind of pointers. The first thing that we discuss, 17% of the world's brains contributing only 3% to the world's research output. The first major mismatch. The WIPO study also suggesting that yes, as compared to a very low base from where we started for filing patents, we have grown, which is why we rank 6th globally for filing patents. But in the context of absolute numbers, India's share is still low, just about 1.8% of the total global patents. The R&D expenditure that we had also discussed is only about 0.7% of GDP, a sharp contrast to others. For example, US 3.5, China 2.4. And of course, the company, as we had mentioned, the tech giant Huawei itself invests way more, only as a sole company, invests way more than a country as big as India. That becomes an important case. We've also seen another issue relating to private sector being lax in supporting. 63% of the funds or contribution are coming only from the government sector. The private sector is investing very, very less. That is also because of the inertia, because of the risk-averse nature. The problem of brain drain that we had started witnessing from the 1990s. This also has become an issue. Last but not the least, the bureaucratic hurdles and delays relating to approvals, disbursement of grants, leading to a culture where research is not appreciated. So these become the problems that the editorial has discussed. Let's quickly do the solutions. The solutions are simple, can be derived from the problems itself. The first solution that you will write is that you will say that India needs to revamp or increase the funding and at least make it to about 2.5% of India's GDP, at least in the next 7 years, if not immediately, but at least in a graded process. Increased funding. The second important suggestion that you will mention are tax rebates or tax holidays or tax related incentives can be given to whom? The private sector, in order to encourage the private sector to invest more in research and development. Next, dedicated challenges. For example, Anusandhan Research Foundation has been created. Dedicated challenges can be created for bringing in startups to suggest their ideas, to develop prototypes that the government can fund specifically later. But these challenges or prototypes that you need to be making should be on dedicated sectors. If the government requires R&D in semiconductor manufacturing, it should specify that. If the government requires R&D in automobile sector, it should specify that. In the solar sector, it should specify that. In the battery manufacturing sector, it should specify that. So dedicated challenges based on the priority areas for India in the years to come. And based on these challenges, when a startup can make these prototypes, the government should help with incubation centers where these prototypes can be developed into proper technologies. They can be tested, they can be verified, and they can be used. We also need to bring about changes in higher education. Higher education should have proper research faculties that are posted. Higher education should have world-class infrastructure, labs in which testing can be done. And higher education and industry collaboration should also be made recommendatory or even binding. These are few of the suggestions that you can write in this domain. You can attempt a question that for India to become a Viksit Bharat by 2047, the challenges faced in the R&D sector need to be rectified. Elaborate. This can be a question that you can attempt. Next, gaps in regulating digital campaigns. Now, this can be important for GS paper 2 relating to elections and how elections are regulated by the Election Commission. Please understand, the Election Commission is tasked with the job to regulate how elections are conducted in the country, to ensure if candidates are following the norm, political parties are following the model code of conduct, certain rules are set for a level playing field, certain expenditure of the parties and the candidates is taken into account, certain time or silence zone is given for the voters to think clearly when they are not disturbed, and to ensure that this process is done in a free and fair manner. That is the task of the Election Commission, to regulate elections. So regulation of elections is important. Now this regulation often is difficult, or there are challenges that make this regulation not so easy, a lot more difficult. One of the biggest challenges that has made this kind of regulation of elections difficult is the challenge of digital, that is online or social media, election campaigning. Isn't that the case? This is a space which has made the vigilance of Election Commission tougher. This election campaigns shifting to the online medium, the digital medium, has also made certain rules, certain laws, certain regulations very easy to be misused, very easy to be found a loophole in. And let's therefore understand, the editorial is only talking about the funding pattern of online ads on the digital medium. But we will go way beyond the scope of this article and discuss why is it so difficult to regulate elections. That means the candidates, the political parties, election campaigns in the digital medium or the social media. That becomes an important aspect. Yes, online campaigns. Gone are those days where elections only used to be fought on a door-to-door campaign, where people used to only meet people physically. Now there are social media narratives, there are influencers supporting certain politicians, there are podcasts on social media, there are reels on social media, there are dedicated micro-targeted advertisements on social media. In fact, there are social media firms or social media companies or handlers who are recruited only for these campaigns. Yes. So in order to regulate elections in the digital media and social media, what are the challenges? In simple words, why is it harder or tougher to regulate this media as compared to when elections used to be purely fought in the physical space? That becomes a question, a broader theme. What the editorial only is not mentioning, the editorial is mentioning a part of that theme. But we will do multiple or at least 5-6 points in order to cater to a 10-marker question if asked. The first issue when it comes to social media is the easy spread of misinformation. Isn't that the case? The easy spread of hate speech, the easy spread of fake news, unverified content, fake news, any kind of misleading claims, if started from one account, any one account, can therefore spiral and reach millions and millions of people in no time. This fake news has an ability to influence the people. For instance, if this fake news relating to political party A was circulated and that was about something wrong that political party A or candidate A had done. Candidate A and candidate B were fighting elections. This fake news was spread just 2 days before the election or 3 days before the election. Candidate A would not even have the time to contain the spread of these reels. Candidate A would not even have the time to rectify and counter this propaganda. And therefore, because of this nature, of it being viral, of it spreading like wildfire, B can have a very immediate undue advantage as compared to A. That is the case. Why? Because fake news could propagate very, very quickly. Easy spread of misinformation, easy spread of hate speech, fake news that has a detrimental impact in completely swaying the result of an election. The next major issue is also relating to how to identify the origin of information. And that is why here also we need what? Very quick fact check units. It is not that the fact check unit works after 10 days. After 10 days the election is over. It has to act quickly. It has to counter the propaganda quickly. The origin of information is often unknown. And therefore, in order to regulate the social media, Election Commission also now has to work with other stakeholders. The work and the coordination with other stakeholders is also very important. Which are the other stakeholders? The social media intermediaries, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Their coordination is also very, very important and required. This makes it harder, this makes it tougher to regulate. Another major issue is, yes, we have what is called as a silence period. The last 48 hours where campaigning comes to a full halt. You have to allow the voters to think carefully when you have campaigned and to not be constantly nudged till the time they are going to cast their vote. A silence period is important where physical campaigning is stopped. But in this silence period also, how do you regulate social media? Social media reels that were maybe posted 10 days back can therefore be shared and reshared again and again, maybe not by you, the candidate, but by your supporters, but by third parties. Isn't that also a form of continued campaigning? Absolutely yes. So the silence period is often a loophole that very easily can be manipulated, can be broken because of the instant nature of digital medium, because of the sharing nature of digital medium. That becomes a problem. Another problem is Election Commission says this is XYZ is the amount that you are allowed to spend when it comes to election spending or election expenditure. It is different for an MLA election, it is different for an MP election. But there is a cap. You can only spend this much. Why? So that you do not completely use money power or abuse money power in order to completely influence people by votes in that case. So there's a cap on expenditure in order to create a level playing field, whether it is candidate A, candidate B, from political party C or political party D, does not matter. You can spend a required amount, the specified amount, that is the cap set by Election Commission. And therefore, in this expenditure, the expenditure that you do for ads that you put in print media, for example, if the candidate puts a poster in print media, in newspapers, whatever payment they have given for that ad needs to be incorporated in this election expenditure. But think about it. If there is an influencer, a YouTube channel which is not of the MLA or the MP who is contesting the election, but it is of a third party, and they are running certain ads, they are amplifying the digital campaign, they are paying for ads, that amount is often not included in the election spending and expenditure of the candidate. What did Election Commission miss here? The Election Commission missed here the extensive coverage or comprehensive view of who all can be stakeholders in the digital domain. Because this YouTube individual, the third party individual who is not directly the candidate, is also still continuing the job of persuading the people the votes. This third party account is also running ads in favor of the candidate. They are giving their electoral funding very indirectly by running ads for the candidate. This raises an issue of the opaque nature of funding. It is not transparent. Who is funding, where the ads are running, how do we determine expenditure or spending or not? That is a major challenge in the digital medium. The next major challenges, few others, are also relating to excessive micro-targeting of individuals. Social media companies are almost selling their data to these election firms or electoral managers. And based on this data, based on these preferences, based on these caste groups, age groups, etc., micro-targeting, specified ads, etc., can also be misused. Another major issue is, since social media does not really have boundaries or borders, there can also be a case of foreign influence in election campaigns, or at least social media election campaigns. That can also be detrimental for elections, and there can have an influence of foreign influence in India. Another major issue is related to deepfakes. Videos of politicians speaking. The words are maybe theirs, or their face is theirs and words are not theirs. That is also creating a major ruckus in the social media domain. So these are all the issues that you can specify on how regulating elections in the digital medium has become very difficult. You can pick up certain points from here. For example, the Election Commission has recently said, in case you are printing a new ad in the newspapers, etc., it needs certification from a body, the MCMC certification. But this is confined to print media on polling day. Again, suffering from the problem where social media is not covered. This is a time of digital campaigns, and therefore regulating this space is become tough. Digital campaigning is now dominating election spending. The expenditure is distributed beyond parties and candidates. Why? Because there can be third party or there can be individuals. For example, on Meta, that is Facebook, 55 campaigners spent more than 1 lakh on digital political advertisements. Which type of advertisements? Political advertisements. But out of those 55 campaigners, only 23 were official parties and candidates. The rest were third party individuals that were running an advertisement for the candidate or party, but their expenditure or ads will now not be used to be considered as expenditure of the candidate or the party. This is a loophole. This is a misuse. You're trying to bypass the expenditure related provisions. Therefore, here, while parties are legally required to submit expenditure to the Election Commission, digital spending is an ambiguous area. Reverse funding flow is there. Third party entities pay for advertisements on the official page of a political parties. The ad is running on the official page of the political party, but the political party says, we are not funding it. A third party is funding it, so it is not our expenditure. That is why they are not required to disclose what others spend on their behalf as surrogate advertisements. This becomes another major issue of regulation. That's all that we need to know from this article. Let's come to the next one. What are rare earth elements and why is everyone looking for them? We only need to know this editorial is too technical in terms of the number of electrons, the atoms, etc. UPSC does not ask those questions. UPSC in GS paper 3 or in pre will ask very simple explanations. Do you know what are rare earth elements? Is there a confusion? Are there some examples? UPSC can always sprinkle some examples. Are these rare earth elements, they can confuse you with this, the same as critical minerals often in the news? Do you know the difference between the two? Why are these rare earth elements so difficult to be found? Why are they called rare? You should know the reason why they are called rare. Is it that they rarely occur or some other reason? Right? Why are they so important for different countries? Why are countries running behind sourcing these? Just few examples. It's important for critical sectors, etc. And what is the dependence on one country that holds a lot of monopoly of refining, of extracting and processing rare earth minerals, that is the China problem. That's all that you need to know for UPSC. Did you understand? Let's answer these precise questions. Rare earth elements are a group of 17 metallic elements. That means these are a certain type of elements found in the periodic table with certain common properties. They are generally metallic in nature. They have certain very important properties that are required for most of the critical sectors in the country. They have magnetic properties. They can be used in optical fields. They also have major electrical properties as well. The 15 lanthanides in the periodic table are considered part of this grouping, that is rare earth minerals or elements. Scandium and yttrium, all these 17 are considered as a group called the rare earth elements. Why are they called rare? A UPSC pre question can say They are considered rare because they rarely occur in Earth's crust. Their occurrence is very low. Their presence is very low. That is not the case. That is a false statement. If that is a statement that they asked in pre, that they are called the name that they are, is because their occurrence is very low. Their presence is very low. The Earth's crust hardly constitutes of the rare earth elements. That is wrong. Why it is called rare is because even though they occur in the Earth's crust, the extraction process is very tedious. The extraction process is very economically unviable. The extraction process and later the processing process, the refining and processing process, to remove the impurities with which they are found, this whole process is extremely cumbersome and difficult. Did you understand this? So finally, yes, the availability of these minerals takes a major hit. Because the availability takes a major hit, they are often called rare earth elements. They are often existing. Yes, extraction is the removal. They are often existing in certain compound forms, in maybe oxides form. And this makes the extraction very unviable. The concentration in most of the mines, the concentration in which they are being found are very low. For example, if 100 units you need to search, 2 units will be what you extract. The concentration is very, very low, and therefore extraction process is very tedious. Similarly is the processing process relating to removal of impurities, relating to removal of those other compounds to ensure pure availability. So they are not truly rare, but they are hard to extract economically because they do not occur in concentrated deposits. They do not occur as a lump sum in one area that can easily be extracted. Did you understand the first part? Some examples. Neodymium is very, very important, showcases very important magnetic properties that are important for green energy transition. If you want electric vehicles, EV vehicles, for their motors, for wind turbines, for solar energy, etc. These kind of magnets need to be created, and for that, this rare earth element is required. Yttrium is used a lot for lasers. If you need to create lasers for defense technologies, LEDs that are used for mobile handsets, LED screens, everything is electronic in today's time. Yttrium is a very important component for these. So why is it important? Why are nations searching for these minerals? Is because if you need to ensure clean energy transition, solar technology, photovoltaic panels, wind turbines, magnets, electric vehicles, all these that are instrumental in decarbonizing transport require these minerals for their manufacturing. As we discussed, LEDs, computers, hardwares, the electronics, the digital medium in which we live, the future of tomorrow. For nations' strategic and defense autonomy as well. For missiles, for new fighter jets, for satellites. All these areas are very critical for the nations. And because only few countries have a huge presence in terms of mining and processing, for example, China has around 80% of hold and monopoly when it comes to mining and processing of these rare earth elements. This makes it very difficult for other countries because they are now completely dependent on one country to source that. Supply chain issues are also continuing. The only thing that you also now need to know is, are rare earth elements the same as critical minerals? The answer is no. Rare earth elements, as we had discussed, are a group of elements. For example, the lanthanides, and for example, the two others. Critical minerals are not really any kind of group in the periodic table. Critical minerals are a man-made list. What do you mean by man-made list? For example, if I ask you that what is the 3 critical things that you require in life, your list might be different, someone else's list might be different, from a common pool of minerals, elements, etc. According to your needs and priorities, your list of what you will choose will be different, what is critical to you. Similarly, nations have a common need. Often nations have needs according to which sector they want to develop. The electronic vehicle sectors, the automobile sectors, the semiconductor manufacturing sectors, the aviation sector, the sectors associated with battery technology, the sectors related to LEDs and digital technologies, anything, any sector that is important for you as a country that you need to develop. And for that, whichever elements, minerals, metals, anything that you require, those you can put in a list and call them critical for your country. So therefore, even though nickel is very important for India, for any country, for example, lithium in lithium ion batteries is very, very important. Lithium ion batteries, lithium is not a rare earth element, but lithium is a critical mineral. Cobalt, graphite, these are not rare earth minerals, no, but they are critical minerals. Did you understand the difference? All rare earth minerals can be critical minerals, but all critical minerals will not be rare earth elements. That is the difference that you need to know very clearly in case someone wants to get you stuck in the pre-questions. Next, this article is important only for one aspect, that is a submarine called INS Vagsheer. You just need to know a bit about it. What is the type of submarine? What are certain features? How was it made, etc. INS Vagsheer is a submarine of a class of submarine, a type of submarine that is called the Calvary class submarines. You need to remember this. Which type of submarine is it? The Calvary class submarine. It is powered by a diesel electric engine. It is a diesel electric attack submarine, and it was made by the Mazgaon Dock Limited Indian shipyard along with the help of a French company. Its features are very few, they are very, very important. It can evade the radar for detecting the submarines of the enemy radar. It can conduct surveillance of the Indian waters. It can gather intelligence. It has various acoustic techniques that makes it almost a silent submarine. Very low noise that it has to radiate. It has the ability of also attacking. Torpedoes can be used as attack weapons by ships, by submarines. So it has the ability to attack using torpedoes and take up these anti-submarine warfare operations. That's all that you need to know from the INS Vagsheer point of view. That was only important.